When I saw my name missing from the invitation I had paid for, I didn't argue. I called the bank, adjusted one clause, and smiled. By the first toast, their perfect evening stalled until someone finally respected the receipt publicly. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments from where you are watching this video. The invitation was printed on pearl cardstock with gold foil lettering, the kind you hold with two hands because it feels heavier than it should. Lily dropped it on my kitchen counter one Friday evening, her smile soft and nervous. "What do you think, Dad?" she asked. The front shimmered with her name and Tyler's, entwined in calligraphy that could have been carved into marble. I turned it over, scanning each line slowly the way I read contracts. Hosted by Mr. and Mrs. Richard Dalton. I read it twice to be sure. My chest tightened, not from anger yet, just surprise. The kind that feels like missing a step on the stairs. "So," I said, trying for casual, "they decided to host?" Lily froze. Her shoulders dropped slightly. "It's just simpler that way. Mom, Pat wanted consistency for the guest list. You know how she is." I smiled, though it felt like a muscle pull. "Consistency," I said. "That's one word for it." I ran a thumb along the edge of the invitation. The paper didn't crinkle, but something in me did. She rushed to explain. "Dad, you paid for the venue. I know that. Everyone knows that. But Pat said dual hosting lines looked crowded, and she promised she'd say something in her speech." "Ah," I said softly. "A speech instead of a name." Lily bit her lip. "Please don't take it personally." I didn't respond right away. I just studied the embossed letters. My name didn't belong to the event anymore. It belonged to a receipt in an email thread somewhere. "I'm not upset," I said, finally setting the card down, "but I'd like to keep one of these invitations." She exhaled with relief. "Of course. I brought an extra for you." I nodded, folded the envelope carefully, and placed it in my desk drawer. The moment she left, the house grew too quiet. That kind of silence that comes after realizing someone edited you out of your own generosity. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and replayed the last 6 months. The Daltons had insisted on grandeur from the start. A vineyard venue north of town, valet service, custom menus. I'd agreed to cover the deposit because Lily deserved the day she dreamed of. The total was close to $45,000. I didn't blink because it was escrowed, not handed over directly. That's what years as a CPA taught me. Never wire money where you can't see the fine print. I'd set up the account through my business banker, Jason Whitaker. It was standard practice for large event payments. Funds held, released to the vendor on confirmation of services rendered, with a clause for representation accuracy. That last part was my own addition. If the event misrepresented the payer or sponsoring entity, payment could pause until corrected. Most people ignore such details. Accountants don't. At the time, it was just a reflex, a way to make sure receipts matched the truth. Now that clause felt less like paperwork and more like insurance against arrogance. The next morning, I called Hannah Cole, the wedding planner. I liked her. Precise, patient, always with a notebook and a backup plan. "Hannah," I said, keeping my voice light, "I noticed the invitation listed the Daltons as hosts. I just want to confirm the vendor credit still reflects the escrow payer." She hesitated. "It does, Mr. Ellison, but Patricia asked if it could appear as a family contribution instead of a line item, meaning she wanted it invisible," I said. "She said she didn't want guests to feel the event was transactional." I smiled into the phone. "Then I suppose it's only fair to treat it that way." "Sir, don't worry," I said, just making sure all accounts stay accurate. When I hung up, I opened my email folder marked Ellison Dalton Wedding and scrolled to the escrow confirmation. Every payment, every timeline, clean, traceable, accountable. The deposit was scheduled to clear 7 days before the ceremony, pending approval from me. I leaned back and let the coffee cool. Money doesn't buy control. It buys the right to withhold it. That evening, Lily stopped by again with Tyler. He shook my hand politely, like a man still learning what respect costs. "Mr. Ellison," he said, "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. The venue's perfect." "Glad to hear it," I said. "You picked a fine place." Pat didn't visit that night, but her shadow did. Tyler mentioned her at least 6 times. Her seating plan, her photographer, her speech about family unity. I smiled, listening, storing every word like ledgers waiting to balance. When they left, I looked at the invitation again. My name missing wasn't a mistake, it was a message. That was fine. I knew how to send one back, quiet, legal, and irreversible. The next morning I called Jason. "Mark," he said, cheerful as always. "Ready to release the payment?" "Not quite," I said, steady as marble. "We need to adjust one condition first." Jason answered on the second ring, voice bright like a lobby morning. "Good timing," he said. "We're inside the 7-day window for escrow release." I told him we needed a small modification before authorizing funds. He asked if this involved risk or optics, because banks separate those carefully. "Representation accuracy," I said, keeping it simple and clean. Jason paused, then said the existing clause covered misrepresentation broadly. I explained the invitation language and the hosting line shift. "You want a clearer trigger," he concluded, already typing. "Exactly," I said. "If the event claims sole payment by the Daltons, funds pause." He confirmed the bank could hold pending verification without violating vendor timelines. Bank mechanics confuse people because acronyms sound like secrets, not systems. ACH is just an electronic transfer that moves money on a schedule. An escrow account holds funds until conditions turn green, then releases. A hold is a pause, not a penalty, when facts look bent. We wrote it plainly so lawyers wouldn't translate kindness into fog. Trigger 1. Public misrepresentation about who paid the venue invoice. Trigger 2. Removal of required acknowledgment from program materials. Trigger 3. Refusal to correct either within the program's live segment. "All 3 are objective," Jason said. "Any dispute?" "Documentation wins," I replied. He added a manager override if vendors risked missing payroll. I remembered why I paid in the first place and kept perspective. I raised Lily on oatmeal and public library cards after long winters. My CPA job taught me that quiet planning saves loud apologies. After her mother passed, I learned to make decisions without a committee. Lily never demanded expensive things. She wanted steady promises kept. When she met Tyler, I saw a good man still learning courage. The Daltons preferred receptions where photographs worked harder than relationships. I offered to cover the venue because stability outlasts centerpieces. I didn't ask for credit then, just fairness and clean paperwork. The invitation changed the conversation from gratitude to erasure. Hannah met me at the venue office with her binder and patience. She reviewed the production schedule like a pilot does a pre-flight check. "Your banker called," she said, tapping the vendor folio tab. "Escrow terms updated and acknowledged by accounting." I asked about the program script and MC cues. She pulled a page with 3 neat blocks and careful margins. One line thanked sponsors and anonymous family supporters for the venue. Another line recognized staff by role before parent speeches began. "Patricia requested cutting the first line for flow," Hannah added quietly. I kept my tone even and asked if policy required it. "The hotel prefers it," she said. "It protects clarity under pressure." We called the hotel controller, who joined us with exact language. "Our compliance note reads like gratitude," he explained calmly. "It doesn't assign names, only acknowledges the mechanism." He agreed to place the sentence before toasts, not after. "Early placement reduces improvisation risk," he said, eyes steady. Hannah nodded because planners prefer physics over drama. I signed a 1-page acknowledgement linking the bank trigger to that sentence. If the line vanished, the system would pause the release immediately. The controller added a timestamp so no one argued about timing later. "Cutoff is 5 p.m. Eastern for same-day vendor." "Sweeps," he said. "We'll monitor in real time during dinner service." Richard called that evening using a lawyer's polite weather. "Mark, I heard you adjusted payment conditions," he began smoothly. I confirmed the escrow now mirrored our original understanding. He said invitations were cosmetic and meant nothing to serious people. Cosmetic edits become records when guests hold them, I answered evenly. He suggested we avoid unpleasant scenes and trust family unity. "Unity survives facts," I said. "Facts rarely survive vanity." He went quiet, then asked whether this was about pride. "It's about accuracy," I said, and left the silence to do its job. He ended the call with a practiced cordiality I didn't need returned. Lily stopped by around 9, hair in a loose bun, eyes worried. "Did you change something with the bank?" she asked carefully. I set a glass of water down and kept my voice calm. "I tightened the language so everyone gets thanked correctly," I said. She sighed and sat, turning her ring slowly in a nervous loop. "I don't want to fight at my wedding," she whispered softly. "You won't have one," I said. "You'll have a sentence that respects the truth." She asked if Pat would be angry, then frowned at her own question. I told her anger loses oxygen when facts stay simple. She nodded, hugged me once, and said she trusted my judgment. Jason emailed the final rider with clean, readable lines and timestamps. The subject line included the venue code, date, and condition tags. He copied the controller and Hannah, so everyone shared the same page. The rider included a verification method that didn't slow service. If the emcee read the acknowledgment, the controller clicked release. If the line disappeared, the controller clicked pause and escalated. No vendor learns any of this is happening, Jason emphasized firmly. We protect workers first. I replied that workers and truth sit on the same side. He agreed because good bankers respect invisible labor more than logos. On Thursday, Hannah walked the rehearsal space while I traced edges quietly. She introduced me to the floor captain and the audio lead by name. They don't want drama, she said. They want schedules that hold. I asked about Pat's speech length and where she would stand. We capped remarks at 3 minutes per parent, Hannah replied. MC controls the mic between segments. The audio lead confirmed a fail-safe mute on auxiliary channels. The floor captain confirmed cue cards printed with the acknowledgement line. Simple words, large font, centered, he said. I thanked them because clarity eliminates arguments faster than security does. Pat arrived late to rehearsal, perfume first, opinions next. She scanned the room like it owed her brightness on credit. We're trimming fluff to keep flow elegant, she announced broadly. Hannah smiled politely and pointed to the cue card stack. We're keeping acknowledgments per policy, she said firmly. Pat's smile thinned while Richard watched the air for escape routes. She suggested acknowledgments after toasts so the night ended on grace. Grace arrives before applause, I said without raising my voice. The MC practiced the line once, balanced and smooth like a level. Pat looked at me as if the sentence had chosen sides. It hadn't. It had chosen math. Before I left, I placed a single invitation in my jacket pocket. I wasn't sentimental. I was thorough with context and proof. The paper recorded an edit that provoked a correction, not revenge. Tomorrow would be clear because the rules were already laminated. Either the sentence would land and money would move, or it wouldn't. Either way, the people who worked would be protected from someone's performance. That was the promise I kept when I opened the Escrow months ago. It was the only promise that mattered when microphones found air. I locked the rider on my phone and slept like a man who trusted timers. The Vineyard hosted a welcome cocktail the night before rehearsal, meant to be simple. Strings of bulbs hung over the patio, and a breeze lifted linen napkins. Guests arrived in neat waves, all smiles and practiced warmth. Hannah had placed staff where tensions usually collect, near the mic and the bar. I stood by the railing, watching the valley fade to blue. Lily floated between tables, saying thank you so often it sounded like breathing. Tyler followed a step behind, shaking hands and nodding on cue. The evening looked calm from a distance, like a painting with soft edges. Up close, I could hear the brush scrape the canvas. Pat took the mic without asking, the way some people borrow chairs. Family, she said, bright as a chandelier, thank you for joining us for this beautiful celebration. She praised the venue, the floral design, and the Dalton commitment to excellence. She said the words slowly, patting each one like a show dog. We are proud to host this wedding, she added, letting the sentence rest where it could be quoted later. A ripple of polite applause moved across the patio like a breeze you couldn't stop. Richard stood behind her with a practiced smile that never asked questions. I watched Lily's eyes flick toward me, worry crossing like a cloud over light. I kept my expression calm because calm weighs more than noise. Hannah stood near the soundboard and stopped writing for one beat. Pat wasn't finished. Weddings take vision, she said, smiling at donors she didn't have. And vision takes follow-through, which are family values. She gestured toward the vineyard lawn, as if she owned the grass. Then she offered a small, pretty knife. We are grateful for everyone's support, from seating help to taste testing and thoughtful opinions. Her voice sweetened on the word support, like sugar hiding vinegar. A few heads turned my way, polite, curious, and a little uncomfortable. Brooke would have called it social triage if she'd been there. Tyler clapped dutifully and whispered something to his mother that didn't change her posture. Lily stepped forward, took the mic gently, and spoke before Pat could sharpen another word. Thank you to all the staff who've made this come together, she said. We couldn't do it without you. The servers straightened, grateful for air they rarely get to breathe. Pat smiled at Lily, the kind of smile that edits while it blesses. Yes, yes, she said. Our teams are wonderful. Then she turned toward the planner table. Tomorrow, let's streamline the opening remarks, she announced. We'll keep the flow elegant. Hannah nodded politely and replied, We'll keep acknowledgments per venue policy. The sentence landed like a level placed on a shelf. Straight, unarguable, quiet. Pat pretended not to hear the word policy, which is what people do when rules don't match their reflection. Richard changed the subject to the weather and local Pinot, like a man patching drywall with printer paper. Guests drifted back to comfort, but the room had learned a new edge. Tyler found me near the railing and tried on honesty. My mom is intense, he said, rubbing his neck. I kept my tone even. Intensity is fine when it lifts work, not people's names. He winced because the line didn't need volume to fit. She thinks it's simpler to keep one message, he offered weakly. Simple isn't always honest, I answered, and let him sit with that. He glanced toward Lily, who was laughing bravely near the dessert table. I'll talk to her, he said, more hope than plan. Talk is cheap without timing, I replied. Tomorrow is timing, he nodded, as if the word finally carried weight. Hannah passed us with a clipboard and a steady half-smile that said, I heard enough. Inside the tasting room, Pat performed in smaller conversations with sharper edges. We didn't want this to feel transactional, she told a cousin, eyes sliding past me. Hosting is a privilege, she added, as if the invoice were a rumor. Someone asked about vendors, and she named them like trophies in a case. We spared no expense, she said, which told me she never read the ledger. A friend leaned in and whispered, You handled everything? Pat's earrings flashed when she nodded, lazy with certainty. I sipped water because water never lies, and watched staff replace candles with practiced hands. The floor captain caught my eye and gave a tiny nod, the kind people trade when policy will do its job. Lily reached me finally, cheeks pink from smoothing corners. Dad, she whispered, I'm sorry about the mic. I shook my head. You thanked the crews, I said. You did right. She exhaled, then smiled the way she did when she was 8 and proud of a report card. I hate this part, she confessed softly. I just want to get married without a scoreboard. Then let the scoreboard talk to itself, I said. We'll talk to the room with one sentence. She looked relieved and scared at the same time. You tightened the bank terms, she said, half statement, half question. I kept my answer simple. I protected workers and the truth, I said. The rest will protect itself. The emcee arrived late, a steady professional with a teacher's voice. Hannah handed him the program and pointed to one line. He practiced it twice, low and clear, the way a pilot repeats a checklist. Before parent remarks, we thank sponsors and anonymous family supporters who ensured the venue obligations were met, he read. Pat stood close enough to hear and pretended not to listen. We'll need to keep momentum, she said sweetly. Let's not linger on logistics. Hannah's smile was made of tempered glass. Acknowledgements aren't logistics, she replied. They're respect. The emcee nodded and slid the card into a pocket near his heart. That's where truth belongs when microphones light up. On our way out, Richard stopped me with that law office calm people buy suits to imitate. Mark, he said, let's not make tomorrow about ledgers. I met his eyes and kept my voice as even as a balance sheet. Tomorrow is about promises, I said. Ledgers just tell you if you kept them. He started a sentence and thought better of it. We appreciate your support, he finished, choosing the word that hides work. I let the silence carry my reply because silence traveled straighter than any talk we'd add. Outside, the bulbs hummed and the vines leaned against the night like tired workers. The patio smelled like sugar and effort, the mix you get before real mornings. I drove home with one thought that didn't need decoration. People can erase a name from paper, but not from a payment that still decides when to move. Tomorrow, either the room would share a simple truth or the funds would sit still until it did. That isn't vengeance. It's gravity with a signature. And gravity, I've learned, never fails to arrive on time. Saturday morning came clear and too quiet. The vineyard slept under early fog, the kind that hides mistakes until noon. I arrived before anyone else, carrying a folder and a thermos. Hannah's SUV was already in the loading zone. She was talking with the floor captain while flipping through vendor confirmations. Everything's ready, she said when she saw me, except the payment portal. They're asking for final verification. That's good, I said, setting my coffee down. It means the condition still matters. She smiled. Jason's note was brief but sharp. Funds release only after acknowledgement is confirmed. The hotel's controller arrived next, a tall man with a careful posture. He extended a tablet and stylus. Mr. Ellison, per bank authorization, will log any live trigger here. He pointed to a single button labeled Hold, Release. If the emcee's line reads as written, we hit release. If it's skipped, we pause and notify Jason immediately. I nodded. Simple and fair. Pat entered minutes later, surrounded by stylists and that perfume that travels faster than footsteps. She looked at the clipboard in Hannah's hands, frowned, and said, "We're cutting unnecessary credits tonight. It's confusing for guests." "The acknowledgment is policy," Hannah replied evenly. "It's part of our contractual terms." Pat tilted her head. "Policy can bend for family. Contracts can't," I said quietly, not moving from my place near the window. She turned toward me with that bright, polite smile people use when they're cornered, but still acting. "Mark, darling, nobody's erasing anyone. We're just simplifying. I prefer accuracy to simplicity," I said. "They age better." The controller looked at us, unsure if he should excuse himself. "Everything's already scheduled, ma'am," he added carefully. "The acknowledgement will stay." Pat's jaw tightened, but she dropped the topic with an airy wave. "Fine," she said. "Just make sure the evening stays elegant." As she left, Hannah exhaled. "You think she'll still try?" "She can try," I said, finishing my coffee, "but the account won't move unless truth does first." The fog outside began to lift, revealing the rows of vines lined like ledgers, every one of them straight, measurable, and patient. By mid-afternoon, sunlight pushed through the fog, spreading gold across the vineyard. Hannah moved briskly, directing crews while balancing grace and command. "Timeline's locked," she said, scanning her clipboard. "Music cues, dinner seating, and speeches all synced." I watched her check the emcee's cards one last time, the acknowledgement line centered, bold, and clear. "We're set," she said, almost like a mantra. Jason called just before the rehearsal began. His tone was business, trimmed of small talk. "Mark, confirming the conditional trigger is live," he said. "If that acknowledgement line disappears or changes wording beyond recognition, our system automatically flags it. The controller's authorization key matches your ID." "Meaning," I said, "if truth leaves the microphone, money stays in the vault." "Exactly," Jason replied. "No vendor gets penalized. The hold affects only the Dalton's payment receipt record. You'll have full traceability." "That's all I need," I said. "Thanks, Jason." After the call, I found Hannah near the sound booth. "We're good," I told her. She looked relieved. "Let's hope for the smooth version," she said. "People forget policy exists to keep events humane." Pat reappeared around 4 o'clock, carrying an armful of cream napkins and unnecessary confidence. She smiled at the staff like a monarch greeting subjects. "We're moving my speech after the toast," she declared, "and trimming the redundant thank yous." Hannah didn't blink. "We can adjust order," she said, "but the acknowledgement line stays where the venue requires." Pat tilted her head. "You're very attached to that sentence." "It's attached to a contract," Hannah said simply. Richard walked in, sensing static. "Honey, let it go," he murmured, placing a hand on her arm. "We're already late for photos." She sighed, like someone surrendering in public but not privately. As they left, Hannah turned to me and whispered, "If she cuts that line tonight, this place might witness the cleanest financial pause in event history." I smiled faintly. "That's the goal." When the sun dipped low, the venue lights flickered on. Tables gleamed. The air felt tense but organized, like a symphony just before the first note. I stood near the back, checking my watch once. Timing was perfect. Everything was ready. Policy, paperwork, patience, all waiting for one woman's decision between truth and vanity. The rehearsal dinner began with a view that sold postcards and wine memberships. Long shadows stretched over the vines, while staff set water and folded napkins. Hannah walked the room with her quiet checklist, steady as a metronome. The emcee warmed his voice and marked cues with a felt pen. Renee, the floor captain, tested aisle spacing so servers could pass without collisions. I stood near the back and watched calm settle across tables. Tyler greeted relatives with small promises about tomorrow's seating miracles. Lily squeezed my hand and asked if I felt okay. I told her the room felt level, which was true enough. Pat arrived late and radiant, followed by a camera she'd hired without permission. She announced the photographer would capture rehearsal candids for a family album. Hannah stepped in gently, explaining vendors were locked and releases were required. Pat waved the concern off like steam from soup on a cold day. "We'll keep it elegant," she said, scanning the program card with a smirk. Her finger paused on the acknowledgement line and tapped it twice. "We can kill this tomorrow for flow," she declared confidently. "Long speeches bore donors and confuse elderly guests." The MC didn't flinch. He just capped his marker calmly. Hannah's voice stayed even, the way pilots sound during turbulence. "The sentence stays per venue compliance in our production agreement," she said. Pat smiled without softness and asked Richard for backup that never arrived. He debated the carpet pattern with sudden interest, then adjusted his cuff. "We want momentum," Pat insisted, turning to the MC like a director. "Trim the gratitude and land on vision, not logistics." The MC pointed to the bold text and shook his head once. "My script lives with policy," he said gently. "I'll read acknowledgments before any parent remarks." Pat's eyes cooled, measuring where pressure might still work. She tried the staff next, because bullies always test quieter doors first. "Smile wider," she told a young server. "Guests notice energy before plates." Renee stepped forward, voice professional and steel-wrapped. "We serve safely and respectfully," she said. "Our smiles aren't rented with the linens." Pat laughed lightly, pretending to enjoy the banter she didn't invite. She redirected toward lighting and requested dimmer whites to flatter mature complexions. The AV lead adjusted 2 points and held the rest firm. "We're at spec for cameras," he said. "Any darker and servers risk collisions." Pat's earrings flashed, irritation caught by glass and chandeliers. The MC began a full run-through, voice carrying just enough authority. "Good evening and welcome," he read, then entered names and sequence precisely. He hit the acknowledgment line cleanly, centered, and unhurried. Pat cut across him with a bright, interrupting laugh. "Let's bury that after the toasts," she suggested, "so the night ends graceful." Hannah answered before anyone else breathed. "Grace arrives before applause, not after," she said calmly. Richard tugged his sleeve and whispered something about optics and compromise. "Accuracy isn't negotiable," I said, keeping my tone steady and ordinary. The controller lifted his tablet slightly, reminder and promise in one small movement. Tyler approached his mother, trying to reduce heat with posture and care. "Mom, it's rehearsal, not a campaign launch," he said softly. "Let's keep it simple." She studied him like a teacher disappointed by a favorite student. "You'll understand when you manage rooms like this," she replied. "Narrative wins hearts. Details slow the music." Lily stepped in, her voice light but holding a firm line. "Details pay people," she said, "and they keep promises upright." Pat sighed dramatically, then turned to me as if seeking permission. "Mark, surely you don't want cluttered speeches?" she asked. "We all appreciate support without turning it into accounting." "Accounting protects gratitude from becoming theater," I answered, still calm. "One sentence keeps truth from getting lost behind applause." The MC resumed and finished the run without another interruption. When he ended, a small, respectful quiet settled into place. Renee briefed servers while the AV lead confirmed backup power quietly. Hannah closed her binder and gave me a look that felt like agreement. Richard shuffled papers and pretended to discover urgent legal weather. Tyler thanked staff he'd ignored earlier and looked older by a year. Lily exhaled like someone finally released a break she hadn't noticed. During dinner, Pat made the rounds with curated warmth and careful phrasing. "We're proud hosts," she said, collecting compliments like coupons with expiration dates. A cousin asked whether both families contributed to the venue. Pat smiled and answered, "The Daltons ensured excellence," which said everything and nothing. I resisted the urge to correct her because tomorrow carried sharper instruments. Hannah caught my eye and tilted her head toward the controller discreetly. He lifted the tablet again, screen sleeping under his thumb like a guardian. Tyler refilled Lily's water and apologized with his eyes alone. She nodded, choosing peace and patience over instant justice. After plates cleared, Pat requested a quick alternate close at the mic. The MC listened, then placed his palm on the program like a seal. "Tomorrow follows this order unless policy changes," he said kindly. "It won't," Hannah added, standing beside him like anchored marble. Pat adjusted her bracelet and gave me a smile sharpened for photographs. "We'll see what plays," she said, stepping off the small platform. "Crowds prefer elegance to bookkeeping." I didn't answer because the room already had its answer. Renee's crew glided through tables while the AV team coiled cables precisely. The rehearsal ended without applause, but with boundaries everyone could read. In the parking lot, Richard finally spoke like a man who recognized numbers. "If that sentence triggers a hold, what happens precisely?" he asked. Funds pause, I said, until the acknowledgment airs or a correction lands. He swallowed hard and stared at the vines going dark along the hill. She won't enjoy choosing between microphone and money, he said quietly. Then she should pick both, I replied. Speak cleanly, and everything moves. He nodded once and thanked me without performing it. Tyler walked Lily to their car while Pat called someone, hunting backup that wouldn't arrive. The night folded itself neatly, like linen ready for real work. I drove home through a town already cooling into sleep and routine. The invitation lay on my passenger seat, heavy with someone else's edits. Tomorrow wouldn't require speeches from me, just attention and a steady pulse. The acknowledgement would land, or the payment would wait. Both were fine. Workers would be protected either way because the system respected them. Lily would get her day without learning bank vocabulary at the altar. I set the invitation in my drawer and closed it softly. Rehearsal had revealed fault lines, but the structure still stood straight. Gravity, as always, was on schedule. The morning of the wedding smelled of cut grass and weather behaving itself for once. The sky was clear, the air steady, conditions any planner would call neutral gold. I reached the vineyard early, long before guests or photographers, carrying only a folded program and calm that had been built, not borrowed. Hannah greeted me near the terrace with her clipboard held like armor. Vendors checked in, she said. Everything's on time. Perfect, I said. Let's keep it that way. The controller nodded from across the hall, tablet in hand, the hold release button glowing faintly like a heartbeat. Jason's email had already come through. System live. Conditions armed. I didn't reply. Some confirmations don't need words. Pat arrived just before noon in a whirl of perfume, fabric, and commentary. She paused at the entrance, assessing everything like a buyer at an auction. It's elegant, she announced, loud enough for staff to hear. Just the tone we envisioned. She walked over to Hannah and gently pried the schedule from her hand. We're starting speeches after the second toast, she said. Per venue policy, the acknowledgement comes first, Hannah replied. Pat smiled, brittle but practiced. Of course, she said sweetly, but we'll decide live, depending on energy. Energy won't override a contract, I said, not looking up from my program. Her head turned sharply toward me, the smile thinning to its true shape. Mark, this isn't a courtroom, she said. No, I said. It's an event with receipts. Richard appeared behind her, his voice low and rehearsed. Let's just get through today, he said, offering a look halfway between truce and exhaustion. Pat adjusted her bracelet and walked off toward the photographer. Lily found me outside near the vines. She looked radiant and nervous all at once, holding a bouquet that smelled like spring pretending to be permanent. Dad, she whispered, promise me there won't be a scene. I promise, I said. No scenes, just sentences. She frowned, not fully understanding, but trusted me enough to nod. You'll sit front left, near the aisle, she said. Tyler's parents are across from you. That's symmetry, I said softly. Good design. Guests began to arrive around 4, filling chairs and sipping champagne that cost more than it tasted. Hannah floated from group to group, keeping chatter light. The MC tested his mic quietly behind the curtain. Renee's crew moved with rhythm, setting glasses and adjusting napkins in smooth waves. I stood by the side window, watching the controller monitor his tablet like a pilot. The ceremony started on time, rare, almost suspiciously rare. Lily walked down the aisle under a beam of sunlight that looked designed for her. Tyler waited, palms pressed together, eyes bright. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because this moment belonged entirely to her. When they said their vows, I could feel honesty in the way they looked at each other, something untouched by adults' ego battles. After applause and photos, guests flowed into the reception hall where soft jazz filled the space. The tables shimmered, the wine poured, smiles multiplied by habit. Pat began to work the room like a campaign tour, all charm and choreography. So wonderful to have everyone here, she said to each cluster of guests. We really poured our hearts into this. Hannah stood near the bar, notebook closed but eyes open, waiting for cues. The dinner moved smoothly through appetizers and speeches. The MC read the first few names without issue, voice steady. Then came the small hinge of the night. He adjusted his mic and began, before our parent remarks, we want to extend gratitude to those who made this evening possible, our venue partners, staff, and an anonymous family supporter, whose contribution ensured all commitments were honored. Applause spread politely, Then genuinely, the controller glanced at me and tapped release. Funds cleared. The system worked. I exhaled slowly, but Pat couldn't let air stay peaceful. She rose from her seat, took the mic from the MC, and laughed into it like she was reclaiming oxygen. "Oh, come now," she said brightly. "No need for mystery. The Dalton family is proud to have hosted this beautiful event." The MC froze. Hannah's pen stopped mid-note. The controller's thumb hovered above hold. I watched Richard's expression drain into realization. He knew what that sentence cost. The room clapped awkwardly, unsure whether this was grace or vanity. Pat continued, "We spared no expense because our son deserves the best." She smiled, unaware the lights themselves seemed to hum louder. Hannah leaned toward the controller and whispered, "Policy triggered." He nodded once and pressed hold. Somewhere behind the scenes, a notification reached Jason's desk. The music shifted slightly. Guests didn't notice, but I did. The room had changed temperature. The truth was waiting its turn. The silence that followed her sentence lasted 3 seconds, but felt like a held breath inside a courtroom. The guests didn't sense the shift yet. Only the planner, the controller, and me knew what just happened. The controller glanced at his tablet. The screen flashed, hold confirmed. A bank process that usually hums invisibly now sat still, waiting. Hannah took one quiet step toward the sound booth and whispered to the MC, "Stay on script. Don't engage." He nodded slightly and stepped back from the mic, professionalism stiff in his shoulders. Pat, glowing from applause that never came, continued with the confidence of someone convinced charm outruns truth. "We're so proud to have hosted everyone here," she said again. "It's a blessing to give our children this start." The servers exchanged glances. The AV lead, already briefed about the possible trigger, raised his hand to signal a soft music fill until the program recovered. I watched as the controller's phone buzzed once. Jason's notification, right on schedule. Jason never called during events. Instead, he texted a single phrase. "Clause 2 activated. Pending correction." I turned my attention back to the table. Lily whispered to Tyler, confusion tightening her face. "Why does everyone look weird?" she asked quietly. Tyler frowned at the silence around the stage. "I don't know," he murmured. "Mom's just being mom." Hannah approached Pat between songs, smiling like a diplomat. "Beautiful words," she said evenly. "But the venue acknowledgement must remain accurate. The system is verifying that now." Pat blinked, still smiling. "System?" "Yes," Hannah said softly. "The one that keeps the lights on." The AV lid started the next track. Pretending everything was fine, Richard leaned toward his wife, voice barely audible. "You just froze the payment," he said, jaw clenched. Pat laughed, dismissive. "Nonsense." Richard turned to me, panic flickering behind calm. "Mark," he said carefully, "we should clarify before the staff gets caught in the middle." I took a slow sip of water, then set the glass down. "Clarify? I agree." I stood, steady and quiet, feeling the hum of tension rise around us. The night had just stepped into its lesson. The music softened as the MC glanced at Hannah, searching for direction. She gave a small nod. "Continue, but slow." The crowd's laughter faded, replaced by that quiet curiosity that fills rooms before news breaks. Richard stood first, calm mask back in place. "If I may," he said, taking the mic from Pat gently, "we'd like to thank everyone who made this possible. Our incredible vendors, staff, and all who contributed." He emphasized the word all like a man negotiating with an invisible referee. Pat tried to reclaim the microphone, but he didn't hand it back. "The acknowledgement," he said tightly, looking toward the MC. "Please read it again." The MC hesitated only a second, then read clearly, "This evening is made possible by our sponsors and an anonymous family supporter who ensured every obligation was honored." Applause followed, louder now, honest this time. It didn't roar. It rolled, solid and grounded. Hannah exhaled quietly and glanced toward the controller, who tapped Verify Acknowledged. The tablet blinked green. Hold cleared. Jason's next text came seconds later. Clause satisfied. Funds restored. I stayed seated, watching the color drain from Pat's face as she realized applause had shifted sides. Her smile faltered, the kind that cracks under truth. Richard gave her a small nod that said enough. She looked at me then, eyes narrowing not with anger but understanding. She finally knew the game had rules. The MC smoothed over the tension like a pro. "Now let's raise a glass to honesty, hard work, and family coming together," he said. The guests clinked glasses, uncertain but compliant. The servers resumed, Wine poured again, and the hum of conversation returned, slightly sharper but breathing again. Lily leaned toward me across the table. "Dad," she whispered. "What was that?" "Just a clarification," I said quietly. "Sometimes ledgers speak louder than speeches." She frowned, still puzzled, but smiled faintly. "You're always 3 steps ahead," she said. "Old accountant habit," I replied. Across the room, Pat sat back down, shoulders tight, eyes low. Hannah leaned close to the controller and murmured, "System closed. Everyone fed. Lesson delivered." He smiled faintly. Quiet compliance. My favorite ending. The night carried on, but the air had changed. Every light in that hall seemed clearer, like even electricity respects correction. The room found its balance again, like a level settling after a bump. Glasses clinked softer, and the band eased into a steady groove. I stood only when the MC nodded, not to steal attention, but to place it. 2 minutes, I told him quietly, and he smiled like a man who liked limits. At the mic, I kept my voice even and my hands still. "Thank you for your patience," I said, looking at staff first, not the front tables. "Events this beautiful don't happen by accident. They happen by work." A few heads tilted, curious about where I would aim the light. I aimed it toward the people who carried the room. "Renee and your crew," I said, finding the floor captain near the aisle. "You moved like clockwork and kept guests safe." Renee nodded once, surprised, then stood a little taller. "AV team," I continued. "You kept sound clean and eyes comfortable." The lead raised a hand from his board and gave a quick half bow. "Catering, florals, coat check," I said. "You covered needs before people knew they had them." The applause rose carefully, honest, and not too loud. I felt the grip of the room loosen 1 notch, like it remembered its spine. "Tonight had many supporters," I finished, "and every one of them matters." I didn't mention names beyond roles because roles built the night. I also didn't say dollar amounts because numbers would only invite more theater. The point was simple. Respect runs on facts and thanks in the right order. I stepped back from the mic, but the MC motioned me to stay a beat. "Mr. Ellison," he said gently, "one more line?" I nodded because the moment could carry it. "Weddings are promises," I said, meeting Lily's eyes. "Promises prove themselves when attention isn't free." She held my look and smiled like the worry in her shoulders finally had a place to go. It went somewhere useful and stayed there. Lily met me at the edge of the dance floor before a new song started. "Was that about the bank?" she asked softly, keeping her voice for me alone. I kept mine quiet too. "It was about accuracy," I said. "We made sure the room heard it." She searched my face for anything sharp and didn't find it. "Did you plan that exact moment?" she asked, almost teasing. "Not the moment," I said. "Just the rails." She exhaled, relief replacing the knot in her expression. "Thank you for keeping it gentle," she said. "I wanted a wedding, not a trial." Tyler joined us with a careful step, learning how to stand between families. "I should have pressed my mom harder," he admitted, eyes steady. "I thought it would smooth over on its own." I shook my head. "You kept Lily centered," I said. "That matters more than stagecraft." He nodded, taking the line in like clean water. Lily squeezed his hand once, as if sealing it. "Can we move forward now?" she asked. "Please say yes." "Yes," I said. We moved forward with the truth already on file. The band lifted the volume just enough to soften edges, and I stepped aside so they could dance. Renee stopped me near the service door with a smile that looked earned, not borrowed. "No one ever thanks us first," she said. "You're different." I shrugged. "I'm old accounting with the carpenter's heart," I said, half joking. The AV lead came over and tapped his headset. "We had your back either way," he said, "but it felt good to watch policy win." "Policy wins when it protects people," I answered. A server passed with dessert plates and whispered, "My rent breathes easier tonight." I said, "Good," and meant the word more than most speeches do. Small thanks moved between us like steady current. Hannah drifted to my side with that planner, calm that never brags. "You were exact," she said. "It kept the room safe." I thanked her because the line would not have landed without her spine. "You wrote the checklist," I said. "I just read the gauges." She smiled, then nodded toward the head table. "Richard understands now," she said. "He'll handle cleanup with words and emails." I asked if that included vendors and guests. "Yes," she said. "Corrected language goes out first thing." I looked past her to where Pat sat, quiet for once. "And her?" I asked. "Learning curve," Hannah said. "But the slope is real." Richard approached like a man who finally respected the floor beneath him. "Mark," he said, voice low. Thank you for preventing something worse. I kept my tone neutral. Thank Hannah and the controller, I said. They kept everything straight. He nodded, accepting rank where it belonged. We'll correct the record with vendors tonight, he continued, and with guests tomorrow morning. Do it without spin, I answered. Short and exact, he agreed, then glanced toward Pat. She'll need time, he added. Time is fine, I said, but the ledger is closed. He nodded again, knowing I meant the night, not the marriage. Pat stood as we passed her table, and for a second I saw a person, not a performance. Mr. Ellison, she said, steady now. The staff deserve that. I answered without edge. They did. She looked at the stage where the mic waited, then back at me. I'll keep my remarks short, she said, a small promise. Short is good, I said. Correct is better. She accepted the line without flinch, which I respected. Not victory, not surrender, just understanding. She returned to her seat and fixed a loose bracelet, hands calmer than before. Maybe honesty had found a small chair at her table. When the father-daughter dance finished, the emcee offered a light closing. To truth, to work, to love that pays its bills, he said. The guests laughed in that relieved way rooms do after weather passes. I walked the edge of the hall, thanking staff by name again, quieter now. The controller caught my eye from the doorway and tapped his tablet once. All green, he said, like a pilot landing clean. Appreciated, I replied, and he slipped back to operations. The night didn't glow brighter, it simply stopped wobbling. That was enough. Good rooms don't need glitter when they have balance. On the terrace, the vines breathed cool air over the stone. Lily joined me with her bouquet and leaned on the rail. I thought it would ruin everything, she said softly. Then it didn't. Because people chose better, I said. That's all it takes most nights. She nodded, face clear again. I learned something, she added. Class is not who talks prettiest. It's who keeps promises. I smiled because that was the whole lesson. Keep that line, I said. You'll use it for years. She hugged me, short and tight, then went to rejoin her husband. I stayed and let the quiet finish its job. Inside, the last song ran its course without a stumble. Staff stacked glasses in safe towers and moved like tired champions. Hannah closed her binder and finally let her shoulders drop. Richard shook hands with the emcee and signed a single page with neat strokes. Pat thanked the florist without cameras, a good start if she keeps it. I picked up my jacket and checked my pocket for the invitation. It was still there, still missing my name, still heavy. It no longer bothered me the way it had. The receipts had already written the correction, and the room had read it. That was the end I wanted, and the only one that lasts. Sunday afternoon carried the kind of quiet that fixes a week. I brewed coffee, swept the porch, and let the house breathe without tuxedos or speeches. Lily texted a photo from their drive, 2 hands with new rings and a paper cup between them. We're okay, she wrote, and the message steadied everything. I sat on the top step with a mug and the invitation in my pocket, still heavy, still missing my name, still irrelevant after last night. Around 3, a black sedan slowed in front of my yard and idled like a thought trying to form. Richard stepped out first, tie gone, jacket folded over his arm, eyes tired but civil. Pat followed, hair pulled back, makeup softer, carrying a manila envelope like a truce flag. I stood but didn't step forward. The porch was neutral ground and stayed that way. Richard spoke first because lawyers know the value of opening lines. Mark, he said, voice even, we'd like to apologize for last night and the months before it. I nodded once and waited because apologies finish better when silence sets their pace. Pat held the envelope with both hands as if weight might help her choose words. I edited you out, she said quietly. I told myself invitations were cosmetic, but I used that to erase you. I didn't rush to fill the space. A clean ledger doesn't talk fast. She went on, slower now. I wanted to look generous, she admitted, and I confused image for grace. Richard added, We've drafted correction letters for vendors and guests. No explanations, no spin, just facts. He offered the envelope like a contract. I let it rest between us for a breath. Read me one, I said, because spoken words reveal motive better than signatures. Richard unfolded the first letter and kept it short. To our vendors, thank you for your work. Venue obligations were completed through an escrow contribution from a family supporter who requested anonymity. Our earlier remarks implied otherwise. Please accept our correction and appreciation. He stopped there, resisting the urge to gild it. Pat opened the second. To our guests. We misstated who hosted the venue. The event depended on multiple family contributions processed through Escrow. We're grateful for the support that upheld our commitments. She lowered the page and met my eyes without flinching. We'll send these today, she said, not asking permission, just promising clarity. I nodded once because the sentences carried the right shape. We sat on the steps because chairs felt like too much ceremony. Pat glanced at my mug and then at the invitation in my pocket. I used to think credit was a kind of kindness, she said. Now it feels like theft when it's misplaced, I answered plainly. Credit is accuracy, I said. Kindness is how quietly you handle it. She took that in like a pill that needed water. Last night, she said, when the music paused, it felt like the room was holding its breath for me to change. Richard exhaled, remembering the controller's tablet. I understood the cost faster than she did, he admitted. I should have protected the truth sooner. I said nothing for a beat, then added, protect it now, and keep it protected when rooms get louder again. That line held because the week would test it soon enough. Pat surprised me by asking about the workers first. Do we owe anything additional? She said. Tips, acknowledgments, letters? I told her Renee's crew would appreciate notes without logos, and that prompt payments move faster than praise. Richard wrote names on a legal pad like a student who finally respected homework. We'll deliver tomorrow, he said. Handwritten, short, and exact. Pat hesitated, then asked the question sitting behind her eyes. Did you intend to expose me? I shook my head. I intended to protect the staff and the promise, I said. If the protection taught a lesson, good. But the goal was never spectacle. She nodded, processing a kind of victory that doesn't post well. I can live with that, she said softly. I need to learn to live with that. We shifted to the marriage because that ledger mattered more than any invoice. Boundaries, I said, will keep you close to them without sitting in their decisions. Richard nodded. Spell them, he said, pen ready. I kept it simple because simple survives storms. 1. No public claims about finances without both their consent. 2. No rewriting of gifts. If you give clean. 3. No triangulating stress through Lily or Tyler. Bring concerns to each other first. 4. If you host, you pay. If someone else pays, you thank them without editing. Pat repeated each rule quietly, testing how the words fit her mouth. I can do that, she said, and it sounded like work rather than performance. We can do that, Richard added. Weight behind we. Work, I've learned, always beats theater in the long run. Pat set the envelope on the step between us. One more, she said, voice steadying. I'm donating to your daughter's hospital fund tonight. Off record, unless they need public dollars. I held up a hand, keeping this clean. Speak with their foundation office, I said. Ask what's useful, not photogenic. She smiled, embarrassed and grateful at once. Useful, she repeated, placing the word where it should have been months ago. Richard stood, then paused, hands open. Thank you for not humiliating us, he said. You could have. I shook my head. Humiliation doesn't fix invoices, I answered. Correction does. He absorbed that line the way a parched yard takes rain, slowly and all the way down. They stood to leave, and Pat reached out a hand she hadn't rehearsed. I took it because grace should travel in both directions once the ledger is right. Tell Lily we're proud, she said, and that we'll learn to be smaller when the moment needs it. She'll notice, I said, and she'll remember. Richard gave a small, unpracticed smile. We'll send the letters by 5, he promised, and we'll keep them brief. Brief stays true, I said. The sedan eased away, quiet as a satisfied exhale, and the porch felt wider after it left. I poured the rest of my coffee into the garden and let the afternoon settle. The invitation remained in my pocket, unchanged. The record, finally, did not. Inside, I called Lily. We kept it light because honeymoons deserve peace. Everything okay? She asked. Better than okay, I said. Corrections are in motion. She laughed softly. You always make problems sound like furniture you can move. Only when they aren't bolted down, I said. We traded small plans about dinners and spare keys and said good night in voices that had room again. When the house went quiet, I placed the invitation in a file and closed the drawer with exactly enough force. Some stories end with fireworks. Mine ends with a stamp and 2 envelopes leaving on time. That's the kind of victory accountants trust and families can live with. Monday morning started like paperwork always does, with coffee, silence, and closure. An email from Richard arrived first, carrying scanned copies of the correction letters on Dalton letterhead. The language was crisp, polite, and short. Vendors replied within hours with polite thumbs-up emojis or two-word replies like received, appreciated. No drama, no confusion, just professional air returning to lungs that had held tension too long. I forwarded the confirmations to Hannah and Jason with one line, all resolved. Jason replied, ledger balanced. Glad to see clean arithmetic in the wild. That made me laugh for the first time in days. By mid-morning, the bank released its final reconciliation notice. The system recorded the full release timestamp, not 1 second late, not 1 second early. The note read, all conditional triggers satisfied. Transaction closed permanently. It felt less like money and more like integrity signing off. I printed the page, not for proof, but for the kind of peace that lives in drawers next to birth certificates and deeds. That afternoon, I stopped by the hospital where Lily worked. She was off shift but waiting in the break room, hair tied back, scrubs half folded. Dad, she said, hugging me hard, you handled it like an adult in a movie. More like an accountant with patience, I said. She smiled, settling into the chair beside me. Tyler's parents called, she said. They told us everything, even the letter part. Good, I said. Transparency builds better houses. They offered to help with the foundation drive, she added, but Mom said no press. I nodded, proud but not surprised. Maybe they learned that useful beats photogenic. Lily grinned. Your line's catching on. We walked through the halls together, passing monitors and quiet voices. In one room, a nurse taped a thank you card to a board that read grateful for clean starts. Lily stopped and smiled at it. You'd like her handwriting, she said. I thought about all the names that should have been on invitations and weren't. Workers, planners, quiet hands. That's who keeps the world built, I said. Later that week, I met Hannah and Renee for coffee at a diner that smelled like routine and maple syrup. They handed me a small envelope signed by the staff. Inside was a single note written in clean block letters, for respecting work. No signatures, no grand gestures, just the kind of thank you that ends stories correctly. Hannah raised her mug. To clean contracts, she said. Renee added, to people who mean what they say. I lifted mine last. To checks that clear and names that stay where they belong. As we left, Hannah mentioned something she'd been building quietly. We started a small policy fund, she said, to educate vendors about fair contracting, using part of our tip pool. I looked at her with honest admiration. That's how class looks, I said. Quiet and contagious. She smiled. You gave us a blueprint. Blueprints only work when people read them, I said. You did that part. The following Sunday, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, plain and unbranded. Inside was a handwritten note from Pat. Thank you for teaching without humiliation. I've repaid the florist's overtime and contributed to Lily's unit fund anonymously. Keep this between us. I folded it once, smiled, and kept it unphotographed. Some receipts stay sacred. Evening fell slow that day. Gold at first, then the kind of calm blue that makes you believe in rest. I stepped onto the porch with a new cup of coffee and watched light fade over the street. For the first time in months, I didn't think about ledgers or clauses. I thought about how revenge isn't about pain, it's about precision. You don't yell, you don't humiliate, you correct. You make the truth inescapable, visible only when it matters. The following week, the venue mailed an evaluation survey. One of the questions asked, would you recommend our event services? I wrote, yes, but only because you kept your word under pressure. Then I signed it simply, Mark Ellison. No titles, no father of the bride, just a name in the right place. I still keep the invitation in a drawer, beside the final receipt. The missing name doesn't sting anymore. It serves as evidence of what got fixed. A good ledger doesn't need revenge written in red ink. It just needs balance. Before turning in that night, I looked at the house plans pinned to my workshop wall, the porch repairs, the garage shelves, small things waiting for hands in daylight. My phone buzzed once. It was Lily. Dinner next Sunday. Pat and Richard cooking. I smiled. As long as they don't print invitations, I texted back. She sent a laughing emoji and a heart. I switched off the light and felt that rare kind of peace that accountants, fathers, and quiet men understand. The satisfaction of everything squared and every word where it should be. If you enjoyed this story and learned something from it, give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful life lessons.